to Adventures in Contracting. I am Leona Charles, CEO and founder of SPC Business Consulting, where we do all things government contracts.
Hey, everybody. I'm Vivica Brooks. I'm the founder of the Brooks Group, also known as TBG Trains, and we're a workforce development organization.
So you can hear our episodes on SoundCloud at Adventures in Contracting or on our podcast website at spcconsulting.org. Um, or you can hit us on Facebook or Twitter at Adventures in Contracting on Facebook and Twitter. It is at contracting under slash IN. So today's episode is really going to be a continuation of what we talked about the last time. And I know I kind of went off on a tangent about the full time work requirement for WOSB. So this is a continuation. So it was a really interesting conversation, and I did some research and I looked up some case law, and I didn't see anything really that talked about um, being prosecuted or them aggressively going after that full-time work requirement. So I think that's a plus. I did, however, see a lot of case law for firms that were misrepresenting themselves as women
hmm
owned, or firms that were um, partially woman owned but not controlled by women. I saw a lot of cases where they were actively going after people for that. So we talked a little bit about
Okay.
the dual control and ownership portion of this requirement, because a lot of people think if I'm just a woman, if I just throw a woman on top and she's a CEO, I'm woman owned, right? And no, not really.
Right.
Not according to the SBA, not according to this certification. There's a control piece that this person has to be versed in the industry that you're working in, but also has to have a 100% grip on the day-to-day operations of it. So you can't have a figurehead. You can't have somebody that just says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to come in and take a couple pictures, have a meeting, and then leave." Right? No, they have to
hmm
run everything. And like I told one of my clients, the buck has to stop with you. That means you have to be the one that signs paychecks when they come in and talk to your employees. Your employees have to point them directly to you for decision making. You have to sign contracts. You have to
hmm
sign the bank card. You have to do all kinds of things that show that you are in control. And it can't be, I can do this, but I have to go talk to my partner to sign off on it. You have to be the ultimate
hmm
decider. Like your partner has to come to you to get it signed off on, not the other way around. And that's the big difference. And that's what I saw a lot of things being prosecuted for. So that makes me feel a little bit better. But I still think that the conversation that we had in the last episode was completely valid, and it covered a lot of things
Okay.
people are thinking about. So for this,
Yeah, and I think just to kind of recap, Leona. So I know you did a little bit as far as what is it that you need to qualify as a woman-owned business, and I think it's important for people to hear and understand that yes, you can't. It just can't be lady on the brochure. It's got to be who's making the day-to-day decisions, who's making long-term decisions for the business. If it is a diverse group and not just women owned. It has to be controlled 51% owned and controlled by
Mhm.
women, and then when you were talking about the size, and I think that's where people, it can kind of get a little tricky, right? So when they say be a small business, what is like small business according to SBA?
So this is a really good question, and it's one that people I think don't understand. So
hmm
small business doesn't mean for every industry it's two people, right? Or even 10 people. It
hmm
depends. Like the construction industry, their definition of a small business is still like $1 million companies, right? But it's just
hmm
because in the construction industry, it's a lot of money and you need a lot of people to run an effective business. So
hmm
they take a common sense approach to it that okay, in order to do these types of projects you would need a company this size, which would still be and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's something like under $10 million, and I'm going right off the
hmm
top of my head, so it's not
Oh
gospel.
yeah.
But I think it's under $10 million. But if you look at construction companies, a $10 million company is
hmm
not that big, right? Which is mind
Right.
boggling, I think, for every other small business, because like for me, I'm like, yeah, I wish, right? But For a construction company, I mean, when you think in terms of how expensive equipment is, how much insurance they have to be
Mhm.
bonded, right?
Yes.
$10 million in revenue might really just have them be breaking even and not really making that much money. So the SBA is,
Mhm.
they're cognizant of that, and so they don't put standards that are going to be impossible to meet. For consulting for my
Yeah.
area of business, it is like, I think it's like $5 million
Mhm.
is considered the limit for small business, and for a consulting firm, that is massive.
Okay.
So I'm like, whenever I'm
Mhm.
doing
Mhm.
stuff, I'm like, yeah, well, I'm well under that, so I don't worry about it. But I think the way you can really understand this is go to, um, the, you have to go to the SBA and you have to read the
Yeah.
program rules, right? They're all based on your NAICS.
Yeah.
So there are certain NAICS codes that the SBA has determined that are just historically underprivileged and underserved and underutilized, and they
Mhm.
will put those in
Mhm.
there. There are other NAICS codes that, they are like, you know what, people use these all the time. Your business can grow exponentially. We're not even, if you're in this NAICS code, you can't even be considered for this because it's not for you. And I think
Mhm.
one of those is like the staffing agencies that they're huge. They do really good. So they're like, yeah, yeah, you can make a lot of money regardless of,
Uh-huh.
your background. So
Right.
the key thing that I like that you said, right, is when you're looking at this, it's the strategic, the long-term strategic day-to-day operations and control. I like that because
Mhm.
that is a
Mhm.
key thing. A lot of small businesses don't do strategy, right? But one of the key ways that they figure out control is who sets the long-term strategy of your company. Because that is a key
Yeah.
component, right? That is a C-suite, um, it's a C-suite exercise, and it really is, whoever is drawing the map is driving the train, right? And so if you are not planning the strategy of your company, you are not in control of it. You don't know where it's going, and
Mhm.
SBA will absolutely say that to you. They're looking for someone who knows day to day what markets you're into, can give them kind of insight as to why you're going there or why you've decided not to go there, and how you
Mhm.
came about that. And honestly, and you and I know, a real business owner can tell you these things like off the top of their head, right? You can
Yes.
have a conversation and you can say, why don't you do business with the government in DC? And they can like rattle off to, well, let's start with this. And then we'll go all the way down here.
Mhm.
And I can tell you why. I can tell you why I don't do business with the state of Maryland. I can tell you why I don't do business, with the state of California. I can go and on and tell you why, and then tell you, and also the cost of me flying people out there, the level of effort I have to expend, the taxes and salaries. These are conversations that as an owner you should be able to have. And I can't tell you how many clients I've sat down with and asked that conversation that can't
Mhm.
tell me why a market was excluded. And I don't understand
Yeah.
how.
Mhm.
How?
Right. And I think that's that piece. I think, two things. One, definitely, yes, people can go to SBA.gov. They've got a great tool that talks about, the size standards that walks you
Mhm.
through that you can just answer. And it's like, okay, now what about this? Okay. And then it was like, yay, you are this size, or no, you don't make it. So they definitely, those tools are there. So to help women-owned small businesses see if they meet that criteria, and I think those are. And the other great point I think you were touching upon is when you're talking about, yes, who's setting the long-term strategy, and I think part of that long-term strategy you're talking about too is you were talking about with construction companies and having to be compliant and things like that. When small women-owned small businesses and they're getting ready in the compliance, what is it that you're seeing with your client that they need to make sure
So
that
this is it.
they're on top of?
So this is a really good question. And I feel like I'm going to sound like a broken record because you know how I'm always saying read the contract, right? And know what you're supposed to do. Um,
Mhm.
with these certifications, you have to read the program rules, right? So I think part of it is we go to all of these events, and well, now we do these virtual events and everybody is like, oh my God, BWSB, it's a set aside, it's a great thing, right? But the reality is it's a program that has rules and has
Mhm.
compliance components. And part of the part of the compliance portion of it, the not fun, the thing that makes my clients' eyes glaze over, they look like deer in headlights, and they're like, why are we talking about it? It's so boring, is because this is what gets you, right? All of these cases that are taken to court are based on
Mhm.
the violation of these rules and these little technicalities,
Okay.
right? So the fact that you're owned and controlled and it's 51%, right? The fact that you make day-to-day strategic decisions. Also, they require you to recertify, annually. If you don't do that, you're not in compliance. They require you
Mm.
some programs, like DC and CB, requires you to have a particular amount of insurance, right? They require you to submit reports. HubZone requires you to submit a report every year. So when you're not compliant, two things can happen. I mean, the most the I guess the least impactful thing that can happen is your certification is taken away from you, right? And
Mhm.
while it seems like that's bad, unless you have a contract that is based on that, the ramifications are not huge for the individual company. You just get it together and reapply, right? The worst thing that
So
can happen,
that you can recover from.
you can recover from that. Now, some things,
Okay.
some programs have a waiting period, right? Like if you lose your certification, you've got to wait a year before you can reapply. So there's
Oh, okay.
some do have a little burn to it. There are others that if you've been decertified, then you're just kind of
Mhm.
out of luck and you don't want to do that. And not very many have that. Most of them have the 1 year. The WSB has the 1 year. If you're found to not have it, you have to wait another year. Then you can reapply,
Okay.
but you still have the option. Um, but if you look at it, some of them, there's a paragraph on the certification page for the WSB certification that says, to the best of my knowledge, all of this information is true, right? And it carries with it jail
Okay.
time and a fine. So I think it's like,
Oh.
I think it's, is it like $10,000 fine? I don't remember right off the head what it is, but it does have that disclaimer. So what I tell people is,
Oh, wow.
please read this disclaimer. Before we submit
Yeah.
this, I ask all of my clients, is this
Okay.
true? I'm going to read you the statement. Is
Mhm.
this true? Your one saving
Mhm.
grace is to the best of your knowledge, right? And people will lean on
Mhm.
that. But if you're the head of your organization and anyone in your organization has been sending emails about, I don't know if we qualify for this, is this right? That makes that statement fundamentally untrue because you're the head of that organization. So if someone has raised the issue to you or to anyone else in
Mhm.
your organization, as the CEO or the president, it is your job to know that this is happening.
Okay.
And for you to say, I don't know, is not a sufficient answer for the
Right.
SBA because you should know, right? So,
Absolutely. If it's being 51% controlled and owned and you're setting the long-term growth and the day-to-day and you're in it day to day, then yes, you should absolutely know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I completely
So
agree.
that's what I run into. And I would say my
Okay.
biggest thing is just to read the program rules. And it's boring. I
Okay.
promise you. It is the worst thing you will ever read. They are dry. They are things that you should read if you have insomnia or if you really dislike someone that you're working with, you should make them read it. But it's so so important because these are also the ways that Congress sneaks in um, little things that tear these programs apart or make them better, right? And these are also these rules. In these rules are the ways that small businesses can find ways to fight for our piece of the pie. If we have a rule that says, like, well, we'll just keep with the WSB, right? That says the not full time. So when they open these things for comments and testimony on it, this is where small business can say, this is keeping us from prospering. This is keeping us from landing contracts. This is keeping us from helping these agencies reach
Mhm.
the goal, right? These are the stepping stones. And we talk about this all of the time, right? About how difficult government contracting is just on its face. Um, but these are some of the ways that you
Mhm.
fight. And I will say, if you find yourself out of compliance, the absolute first thing to do is to send an email to the program manager, whoever is in charge of it, your contracting officer, someone, is to send it in writing and say, hey, who do I talk to about this? I don't think I'm in compliance here. I want to make sure that we're doing things right. How, where should I go? You need to at least lay that groundwork that you are attempting to rectify the situation, that as soon as it was brought to your attention, you knew that you needed to do
Mhm.
something. You sent out an email saying, hey, what do I do? Can you direct me to someone, and show that you're being proactive. And if that doesn't
Mhm.
work, then you go directly to the agency that certified you and you do the same thing. And at that point, what you're doing is you're creating a structure that says, listen, not only were we proactive, we were
Mhm.
positively trying to solve the problem in a way that we're
Right.
transparent. We notified you of our noncompliance, as is the duty of the program rules. We let you know that we hadn't satisfied it, which is required by the program rules. And we, hopefully, when you send this email, you're not going to be like, hey, I am not in compliance, and that's it. You're gonna be like, we've noticed we were non-compliant with this section. Here's how we intend to correct that non-compliance. Is this sufficient? And that's always the phrase that you want to put. Is this sufficient? Right? Because if you don't ask and get approval, they're basically going to say, you didn't even try to work with us. You just said, I'm going to do this, and bye. That's it. Leave me alone. So you need to always have that phrase,
Mhm.
is this
Mhm.
sufficient? Because your defense is going to be, the government agreed that this was sufficient. So why am I here? Right? You always need that. And every time someone does something even mildly sketchy, I'm like, can you just send me an email with that in it, so that I know where we stopped at? And this is the reason why nobody wants to send emails, right? It's because of me. But I want to see it in writing, because then I can refute an email. I can't refute a conversation, right? Because you remember it differently, I remember it differently, and unless it's recorded, nobody really knows what happens. So if it's in writing,
Well, and I think like what you Mhm. Then it's a little easier. And I think it's just easier if it's in writing too, as a small business that wants to, who understands that, okay, I want to be proactive, I want to fix what it is. If it's a litany of things that need to be done, okay, you have it there and you can just start checking it off. I think it's a great way to communicate and also show, the progress. Hey, I've completed steps 1 through 3 you wanted me to do, or here's the documents that were needed, and then you just kind of have a running tally. And then it's better, I think, for both sides, both the agency as well as the small business, to help keep track of, what it is that's outstanding, what we now have. And like you said, is this sufficient? And then how can we keep moving forward?
yeah, yeah. So my biggest takeaway here has absolutely come from you, right? Which is long-term strategy and day-to-day control. Something that we don't talk
Hmm.
about in terms of compliance, because people only think about compliance when they're in trouble. Nobody thinks about compliance before. Like, you remember when you were kids, and you were complaining, your parents tell you to clean up, and they're like, just do it right the first time and you won't have to worry about it, right? And
Right.
that is completely what compliance is. If you just do it right the first time, then you don't have to worry. Like, you don't have to get all excited when it's time to renew and you need to get all these
Hmm.
documents. If you just do it right in the beginning, it's not a problem. You're just like, okay, here, I'll submit this and go in. And I mean, things happen. Nothing with the government is ever smooth. But what we can avoid is the whole, well, I thought this was okay because once you get into government contracting, that's a ridiculous defense. I thought it was okay because you are a business owner. I mean, you cannot, no, that's not gonna, I thought it was no. Did you ask somebody? Did you read the rules and say, I feel like,
Mhm.
the way I understand this is that we're okay according to this clause, and let somebody refute that. But don't just, oh yeah, it's fine. I think it's fine. Let's just, no, you are a business owner. This is business. Don't
Yeah.
do that. And this whole
Yeah,
conversation, Vivica,
absolutely.
it came about because I was in this Facebook group for black businesses. And the thing that we hate, somebody
Okay.
was like, all of this thing going on. Somebody was like, y'all need to be government contracting. And I was like, oh no, no, why? Because then you have all of these people, I'm starting a business. How do I do that? And I was like, listen, if you are a startup, government contracting is not where you need to be. It's not for you. You're not ready. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and you don't get a sell in 30 days. And as a startup, you need a sale in 30 days, right? So that's not the place you want to be. And there are all these people, you can do this and you can, I was like, yeah, you can do that, but it's not helpful if you don't know why you're doing it. If you're just doing it because some random person told you on Facebook, one, you were not ready to own a business because you would know that you don't set strategy by random strangers on Facebook. You set strategy based on,
Well, we always talk about being intentional, right? So we always talk about being intentional and understanding and seeing, like when you said, okay, well, we're not doing business on the West Coast because it's just where we are right now. It's not fiscally feasible, right? So it's
Mhm,
really about thinking about where is it you want to go? What is it you want to do? And with whom,
yeah,
and just really kind of drill those down and let that set the course for you.
right. Yeah, so I mean, I think this all ties into the whole compliance and the whole certification thing ties into what do you want to do? Where are you trying to go? Who is your
Hmm.
customer? And what is your
Yes.
strategy? That's the biggest thing. Like, what is your strategy? And I think, the more that we talk about these things, and I feel like we talk about the same things in like a million ways because that's the way they come up. But when you're a business owner, there are central tenets, right, that you have to know. And one of them is your money and your capital infrastructure. One of them is your staffing, and one of them is your roadmap. And do you know where who sang that song? Do you know where you're going to? Who sang that song? I can't remember. I'm showing my age, right? But
I don't know.
um,
I hear the tune though.
we need to. Yeah, but I don't know who sang it. This is terrible. But we need to really talk to, I think when we have conversations with businesses, and this is something that I talk to my clients about, is do you know what you're selling, who you're selling it to, and do you know how you've priced it and why you've priced it that way? Not based on the business up the street because they've got different overhead, they've got different employees, they've got different taxes, they've got different expenses. Their pricing is not your
Mhm.
pricing. It doesn't matter to you. Why are you doing this? And I ask that question a million times, like, why? Why is that your rate?
Mhm.
Why is that good? Why does that make sense to you? Why is that your revenue margin?
Mhm.
Why is that your return? Why is that your fully loaded rate? And I ask
Yeah.
these questions so that I can get them to understand, oh, there's like a million pieces that need to go into this decision. Why are those your terms and
Yeah.
conditions? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to back your customer into a corner? In which case, if you're trying to back your customer into a corner, you shouldn't be in business, right? If you're in business just to get like every nickel and dime out of your customer, I don't know that you're offering a service of value. Your customer shouldn't feel like they're being held hostage. They should feel like you're solving a problem for them. So the compliance piece is no different. I
Right.
ask, why are you not doing this? Why do you not have this? Why is this so difficult for you to get? What don't you understand? Why is it confusing to you? Because I need to know whether you really understand the program that you're pursuing or if you're just pursuing it because you went to a webinar and they said you should do it. And if so, then I always politely tell people you're not
And I
my
think that's
customer
good. I think
because
that's good reflection. Yeah.
Yeah. If only people would do more.
Well, I think that's good
Right?
reflection to keep asking that why. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like when you said that, you're asking like, why is this and why is that? And I think, like when I'm thinking about the takeaways, I think that's a good thing to have someone ask you and then you ask yourself as a business owner as well. Cause I know I struggle with, myself, is well, we'll always know our why, right? But then it's about when I talk about I work more in the business versus on the business.
Yes.
Anyone who knows me knows I love to teach and train. Find me in a classroom all day long, right? And so, but when you're talking about this piece, it's always good to have someone to ask you that. Okay, so why is this? And what are you all doing this for? And where is it that you want to do it? So I think it's important for small business owners to make sure they get linked up with someone, or even if you just ask yourself those questions. So I think that those were my takeaway is when you were saying, okay, why is this your fully loaded rate? Why are you trying to get into this program? Because it's true, this might not be a program that you want to participate in. So I know that I know myself, my own personal experience, like with getting into some of the programs that have the year, like you can only be in it so many years, and that
Mhm.
people are like, wait, get your contacts within the government first, because the clock is ticking, and you don't
Mhm.
want the clock to be ticking when the clock is ticking, and instead of generating revenue from it, you're building relationships. Build the relationships, do the networking, then go get certified. Then you've got that full time to, what do you say, hunting license, because you've
Yes.
now certified with this program and to go out. So that was my takeaway. I like when you were saying the why. Like, yes, why are we doing this?
I just turned into a 5-year-old. Why? Why? Why?
Yeah.
I want to know what they're doing. But it is helpful because I
Yeah.
think, my goal is I have like the kingmaker philosophy. I'd rather help 100 businesses like blow up than just be like a huge conglomerate myself that really doesn't do anything of value. I would rather do the opposite. I want to help people fly away and say, yes, I am this huge company, and oh, I worked with her and she helped me see all of these things. And I think that's the philosophy that I like to see in other people. I like it to be intentional. Like, why are you doing this? What is your point? What's your end goal? Like, where do you want to end up? I have kept myself purposely small. And I actually had this conversation with my 13-year-old daughter, my youngest, the other day. I said I have, I'm sure that I could have had many opportunities to do other things that would have created a much bigger space, but I wanted
Mhm.
my daughters to have a very different experience than my son. I wanted to be at practices. I wanted to be at games. I wanted to be at award ceremonies. And me being small afforded
Mhm.
me the lifestyle to do that. Right. And so, you know,
Mhm.
I have had many conversations with people who are like, oh, well, if you're not making this much money, you're not successful. And I'm like, I mean, okay, that's your definition of success. But I have 3 kids that say
Exactly.
otherwise.
Yeah. Everybody's got to figure that for themselves.
But we're so monetarily driven. And I think in order to really be successful at your company, you have to have a value. And if that the only value is linked to money, I don't know how successful you can be. I mean, you might have some really good golden years, right? But I just, it's not sustainable long term, because after a while, people are like, I'm just a dollar sign to you, you know? Kind of like the Twitter feed I was reading on
Mm,
these like creators ranting on Apple. And I was like, you might have the best product, but if people feel used, you're not creating a sustainable, business structure. It's just something that's going to fall off. And that ties all the way back to compliance. If the way that you build your compliance structure is the way that you build your business, right? That you build it in a way that is intentional and is that it's set up on the path that you're trying to go to, everything flows really easily. Not to say you're not going to have any bumps, but you'll be able to handle them and you won't have
right.
your business shaken to the core. So, and always remember, small
I like
business,
what you just said there. If you set it up in the beginning with the compliance piece.
and don't forget it. Like it's not, it's like a diet, right? You can't go work out for, you know, a month and still eat chocolate and popcorn and fried food every day and expect to lose 20 pounds. That's not how it works. It's like it's a diet for your business. Compliance is the diet piece, right? It's the food piece. You've got to make sure that you're doing everything right, that you have good practices, that you read the program rules and you understand them, and if you're not compliant, that you're proactive and you take responsibility and you reach out and say, here's an alternative. Is it sufficient? And if not, can you please give me the parameters of sufficiency so I know what to do? And that's it. And so I just wanted to put that's my 2 cents for all it's worth this morning.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great way to wrap up, and so I think that's you've, exposed us to it. Here's some things that may happen. If it does happen, here's some ways in which you can successfully recover, and then keep on moving forward. So it was good.
All right. All right. Well, I am aware of time, but thank you for listening to us this morning, and we will see you next time.